Hi, this is Tony Kent, and this is another episode of Tony Kent Writes and Cross-Examines. Today, I'm being extremely careful because today I will be speaking to somebody who is well used to appearing on broadcasts rather than the sort of amateurish things that we've all been putting together while we've all been stuck in lockdown. This is somebody who does this properly, and therefore I'm going to have to be very careful and very professional, because today I'm talking to THERESA Talbot, who is a long-term BBC Radio Scotland presenter, but is also an author. She is the author of the OONAGH O'NEIL books, Oonagh being a journalist who is in no way, shape or form based upon THERESA at all. Is she, THERESA? She has written 3 books so far. Oonagh has appeared in 3 books so far: The Lost Children, Keep Her Silent, and The Quiet Ones, all of which we will be hearing about in the next 15 minutes. How are you?
Well, I'm super, Tony, and thank you so much for inviting me along. I'm really chuffed. I don't know if chuffed is a UK word, but we use it in Glasgow. It means I'm very happy.
I use it all the time. It's my favourite word.
Oh, and my husband's from Englandshire, and if you say up here in Scotlandshire, if you say, "Oh, I was bumming about that," or "Are you bumming to your friends?" that means you're boasting. And I'd said to my husband, "Oh, have you been bumming to someone?"
Yeah.
Certainly not.
What the hell are you accusing me of?
He's from Bognor. I didn't know Bognor actually existed. So he didn't know what bumming was. Apparently bumming is something completely different down south.
Exactly. Certainly that far south.
I'm really sorry. I can't stop talking. Right.
No, not to worry at all. I actually lived in Dundee for 4 years, so I'm quite good with Scottish, any kind of Scottish lingo. You're very unlikely to say something that I've not heard of. Anyway, so we are going to talk about today any number of things, but I think the thing to focus on would be the OONAGH O'NEIL books. The OONAGH O'NEIL books, I mean, at the moment, it stands as a trilogy, right?
Yeah, so there's 3. She's having a little rest just now. So there's 3 OONAGH O'NEIL books, and the first one is the Lost Children, and that's set in it surrounds the events of the Glasgow Magdalene asylum. Now, if you don't know about the Magdalene asylum, you can Google it, but it was classed as a home for fallen women. So Google Magdalene Institute or asylum, and I was really shocked to find out that one had existed in Glasgow. I thought it was mainly an Irish thing, but one had existed in Glasgow and only closed in 1958. And when I started examining why it closed, apparently there was meant to be a riot. Now, the institution in some shape or form had stood there for over 100 years. I thought, what happened on that night? It was the 17th of September. What happened on that night to close it down? And I originally started investigating for a radio package, and Radio Scotland didn't want it. They want it now. They're not getting it. Anyway. And then I thought,
that's a great negotiating starting point.
Being like a journalist, I had stacks and stacks and stacks of research notes. And I thought, oh, crikey, I feel as though I've written a book. And I thought, oh, I'll write a book. So I set it in the present day with Oonagh as a journalist looking back to, and it's my, so it's not really kind of a hybrid of fact and fiction. It is fiction, but it's my take on what might have happened to close that down and the aftermath. So that's how Oonagh was born.
Oonagh came through. So Oonagh is based upon anyone we know, anyone a million miles away.
She's got great hair. She's quite cheeky. She's quite funny, and she drinks too much. I've stopped drinking because when I was writing her, I realised, I thought, oh, this is all a bit too raw. And when I first had written the book, and because write about what you know, I know that's, in fact, I was listening to a piece on Radio 4 today about writing about what you know and whether you should sort of deviate. But I basically, I wanted to make her a journalist because I wanted someone that could work slightly outside the law. And because I'm quite lazy, I didn't know too much about police procedure. And I didn't know anything about Glasgow gangsters because although I live in Glasgow and I was brought up in Glasgow, I've seen drunk people, but I've never really seen a Glasgow gangster.
Stay away from the ice cream vans.
So I didn't want to get into the kind of corny tough guy routine. And I thought, right, if she's a journalist, she can behave in a way that is slightly outside the law. So she says the things that I wish I could say, or the things that I would have said had I been a bit quicker But when I've got 15 minutes to think and write it, then she says what I would have liked to have said. So, but when I first said,
I find that with Michael Devlin, my lawyer character, when he cross-examines. The cross-examinations, they are ultimately very similar to ones I've conducted, but they just seem better. I'm not sure why.
Quicker. You know, you just, and it's all those one-liners that you think of, like, oh, the next day, oh, I'll give that to Una. So when I first got an agent, and this was years ago. I'm with a different agent now, and she read the book and she said, you know, I really like Una, and I was like, oh yeah, thanks. And she said, oh, but she'd be a nightmare to know personally. You know, she's absolutely bonkers. And I was like, oh yeah, absolutely. So I thought, what will I do to make her slightly different than me? So I put a cigarette in her hand because I can't stand smoking. And that was me to prove that she's nothing like me at all.
Well, there you are. So anyone who knows you, they'll know, well, that can't be that kind of. They can't be Theresa.
But she does lots of things wrong, and she's very flawed, which I want to make her quite human. I'm going to wipe my nose, but I'm not. I've got no infection whatsoever.
Don't worry, I've been scratching my cheek while you were doing that.
And she's quite flawed, and she drinks too much, and she's not. You know, she's got a really, really good professional life. She's got plenty of money, she's well paid, she's top of her game, she's well known, she's a TV journalist, not a radio journalist. She's well known and things just go smoothly for her professionally, but her personal life is chaotic. And weirdly enough, I've had most people like her, but I've had one or two messages to say, oh, someone as professional as that, they wouldn't drink too much, or they wouldn't allow themselves to get pregnant. And I'm like, oh my God, do you not know? You know, and it's weird the kind of this assumption we have about certain characters and people we see who are professional. We think, oh, they've got it taped. Absolutely not.
Well, it's like the old saying, "As sober as a judge." They should come out with some of the judges that I know. It's just absolutely ridiculous. But I mean, she sounds like a very, very compelling character. I was saying to you before, I've been completely upfront. I haven't read any of the 3 books, but I will be now because the Magdalene stuff, just from things I know, my family are Irish, and things I know from sort of the past that impact on them, and also just generally what the impact the Catholic Church had on Ireland. Very, very interesting. So I promise you, I'm not just saying this, I will be buying these books now.
Oh, thank you,
But you followed up very quickly, didn't you? Because that was 2018 for The Lost Children. And then last year, I think we had a 1-2 punch of Keep Her Silent and The Quiet Ones.
Yeah, I'd written a few things in between, and then it was, I hadn't intended to make it a 3-parter, but my publisher said, look, can you do a follow-up? And because the Lost Children was based on real events and my take on it, so I wanted something to frame a crime novel around, something again that something that was criminal in inverted commas that nobody's been jailed for. And I got very friendly with someone who'd been affected by the tainted blood scandal. And again, you can Google that. I won't go into it just now, but it was really quite horrific. And it was one of the biggest medical negligence scandals of the 20th century, as it was. And I got really friendly with this chap who'd been infected as a child, and the things he was telling me. And at first I thought, he's making this up. This is awful. And it was all stuff that was in the public domain. And now that there's been an inquiry, or the inquiry is, kind of sifting in and out. So I based the second book around that. And again, that was Una investigating something that really, and I still can't believe no one's been jailed in this country because of it. And I don't know if I'm allowed to say that because I'm not mentioning any names, am I?
You're allowed to say it. My considered legal opinion. You're allowed to say it.
Well, what I'm saying is, I'm surprised no one's been arrested.
Yeah.
There. That's
exactly.
it. So or questioned, and it's horrific. And then the third book, again, I was thinking I want to do something that's of a real life nature, and again, a crime that's not really been investigated properly. Now, this is slightly different because this person has been jailed, and it's not based on this person. and I'm not going to mention a name. But I get into a taxi in Glasgow, and the driver started chatting to me, and he recognised me from the BBC, and he was asking me about my books. And he'd been the whistleblower, one of the first whistleblowers in the Celtic Boys Club abuse scandal. And I don't know how well known that is down south.
I know about it. I'm not sure how well known it is out.
But it was years ago when he first blew the whistle, and his coach had only been jailed for 2 years because the sexual abuse was deemed to be in the lesser end of the scale, which is what his defence said at the time. But with his testimony, and it was him and Alan Brazil, who's a very well-known footballer, and he was friends with Alan Brazil, and the two of them they were the original whistleblowers. And then after the coach came out of jail, more boys or men then came forward. So he was the inspiration, and he met me the next day, and he was very candid with me and said that I could use. I didn't frame it really around the abuse. I framed it around how very, very successful, very well-known people can get away with the most horrific crimes. And he's
there are so many other examples of that, aren't there, that come into play. There's obviously Jimmy Savile.
Jimmy Savile? What the hell? What?
We all knew.
I think I was only one of the BBC that didn't know. I was genuinely shocked.
Do you know what? You speak about Jimmy Savile. The thing with that was, there are other names that I can't name, but because of what I do for a living, we spend a lot of time with the various police departments and with various senior police officers, and we have a fairly intimate relationship with certain people from Scotland Yard. I could name you a number of people that I would be sued if I named, but that they are well aware of, and they were desperate to be able to prove, but they just can't seem to touch. And I mean, Jimmy Savile, I knew 2002 I became a barrister. I am absolutely 100% knew from that point onwards. And what really offended me with Jimmy Savile was all of the newspapers saying, wow, why did this not come out before? They knew. They all knew. And
why didn't it? And why did a senior cabinet minister, I'm not going to say that. Why was Jimmy Savile given the keys of Broadmoor? What someone signed that off. All sorts of things. And but there's loads of things that kind of slip under the radar. And like Bill Wyman, I'm mentioning his name. He married a 16-year-old, had been going out with this girl and having a sexual relationship from when she was 13, and he was 47 when he married her. And the newspapers were full of, "Go on, my son."
It's shocking. You're sort of, it's almost as if you're either in that little clique that can do what you like, or you're the rest of us.
Wow. So I suppose a drive to Durham under lockdown seems quite life.
And then you can either be in trouble for that, or the government can completely and utterly change all of its advice and its lockdown rules in order to not be wrong.
I'm sure Rolling Stones fans will be just kind of throwing things at the screen just now, but it really does beg a belief that there are certain people who will get away with things, and it's like, should that not have? Was that not kind of wrong?
Should there not have been a consequence to that?
Right, and it's just the weirdest thing, and it's all deemed okay. So that's why when I'm writing crime books, I like to pick things that I see as crimes, or things that actually in the statute books are crimes, but it never really gets investigated. And then just think, well, why not? And that's what I never. I would never glorify or sexualize abuse or violence, and I'm not graphic about it. I don't have the stomach for that. And we all know the things that go on. We don't need to be told, and we know what the horrors are like. But my books are based on the aftermath of a child who's been abused. What happens when he's 50? Where does he go? What's his life? What does his life become? And also, how do these powerful people operate? They don't operate in a vacuum. They operate with
there's a system behind them,
an establishment. So, and then we've just mentioned, maybe I shouldn't have mentioned BW.
No. Honestly, that's a fair comment for a start, and I agree with you entirely. Listen, Theresa, we're literally running out of time. I could talk to you for ages. I really could. So I have to say, right, The Quiet Ones is the most recent book that's out now. Buy them all. I'm going to be buying them all, so try and beat me to it. Theresa, thank you very much for giving your time today.
It's been a pleasure, and I
can't wait to talk to you again.
Okay, thanks.